America's was actually built on the outcasts of society. You know, a lot of them were crooks and criminals, murderers and everything. They were like, get out of our country. Hey, I had so much I could talk about, and I could be blogging forever, but I want to try to say something about this, the black churches and stuff like that, and Rev.Wright and all of that stuff. I think Obama did the right thing. Obama's a politician. The Rev.Wright is a preacher. I turned on the television the other day. I was just so disappointed. It was like Rev.Wright TV on all 4 channels. And then you look at him, and he's like grandstanding. I mean, he has just got his moment in the sun, you know? And, you know, that's okay because he's a preacher. You know, this is wonderful. And if they want to exalt him for his work and the tremendous amount of work he done as a preacher, not a politician. It seems like people are trying to make him he's not running for president. Yeah. Obama is. Obama will say stuff, pertinent issues about particular things. Nobody wants to even hear that now. They're just like listening to, watching this, you know, if you want to see Rev.Wright grandstand, go to his church. You can see him holler and shout and say all kind of stuff that'll make your hair raise, okay? Because that's what they do in black churches, okay? You know, they go and they just lay it to every subject. They lay it to it in the most, you know, and lots of times very unpolitically correct ways based on their experiences. So when when a cop stops somebody on the street or kills some guy in a car from a stag party, where do they go? They go to church, you know, and then they talk about dumb cops, you know. That's what the church is for. That's what keeps them from killing, going back and running out there with a gun and shooting down 10 cops. You know, gotta understand that. You know, Rev.Wright is a preacher. You know, the way they talk, the black church is an emotional experience, especially if you got to worry about getting gunned down in the street, you know, from a stag party, you know. What do you think what are they going to say? What are they supposed to be saying now? They're supposed to be politically correct? That's where they go to holler and scream and let all that out. How do you think they got through slavery? That's what the black church is about. You know, or gaining a family when you had no family, or when you were disenfranchised, or the black male being disenfranchised from government. Now, I'm not saying anything wrong with any one church or another. They're different. They are different. They're different systems and set up a different way. And I've gone through both of them. I used to be an altar boy in the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic Church all my life. But I go to Baptist church, and I've started doing that ever since I moved out of town. I can tell you all the creeds, all the signals, when you're supposed to stand, when you're supposed to do it, when you're supposed to do this, when you're supposed to do that, when you're supposed to do this, when you're supposed to do that, and you know, when you're supposed to do this, and all that stuff, you know. In the Catholic Church, I know all about it. I don't need, some of that stuff is so deep down ingrained in me. We used to have preachers come, and we used to have the good preachers, a priest rather. You know. Nowadays you got too many men clouded up together, something's gonna go wrong. You know. But you know, we used to have preachers that the only time they put their hands on you is to box your ears when we were little kids. You know, and they would take us to the nice rich families. Okay, and those families were good people. They were good people, you know. That some of them had adopted kids, black kids, you know, but they lived on the rich side of the towns, you know. Get over yourself. And you know what? As far as those people praying to the people in the bottom of the boat and one on the other one on the top of the boat, being two different gods? Yes. How many people knows anything about American history? Great Britain, the people who came to the New World, America, were often the undesirables of the Great Britain or England society. They were often the jailbirds. They didn't have enough room for them in jail. They were criminals. Excuse me. Those people that, so slavery was a criminal activity. They didn't have the same form of slavery in Great Britain. They released a bunch of criminals, undesirables, people seeking religious freedom, people that they wanted to kick out of England. America's was actually built on the outcasts of society. A lot of them were crooks and criminals, murderers and everything. They were like, get out of our country, go to America if you survive. You have a fighting living chance. Get out of our jails and go there. That's what I recall. That's what they taught me in school. So anyway, it's just a darn shame that, the black church is different. It's just, it's emotional. Rev.Wright is telling the truth, but, on PBS, Rev.Wright said clean and I don't know Rev.Wright, didn't know him a day since this thing, but, Rev.Wright clearly said, no, I don't teach I don't speak about Obama with politics. He said that clearly. And for Jeff Bex to say, what's his name? I don't know. One of those casters or the Fox people, they're just such a trip. They're wasting everybody's time. To say, oh, he had that man and those people and the black community and the reverends and all of that stuff, they have a service. They have a job to do. They're supposed to marry you. They're supposed to baptize your children. Who else do you go to to baptize your children? You go to the pastor. Of course they're supposed to marry you, and especially if you have a big church. I used to have a policy. When I was a little kid, I went to nothing but Catholic churches. That's the ones that we go to. Those ones that did everything, but when I moved out of town, I moved to, my policy was the closest church on the corner was the one I go to, and it'd be a Baptist church. But you go in those church and they immediately adopt you. So you would actually gain a family. And for a single man out of new in town, that was a wonderful, beautiful thing. The grandmas would cook you a home-cooked meal. They introduce you to the granddaughters or daughters or whatever, the mothers of the church. It's a whole, it's more, and then, a politician, if that's a mega church, they're going to go to the big church in town. You also, like in Buffalo, that was in Kingston, a small church, small little white church on the corner. In Kingston and Buffalo, they had the big complexes. You go to the bigger church, the more congregation, to see more people. That's where the politicians go, okay, to the big mega church, for also political networking reasons, get you to know who's who in the community. You know what? You have more titles, and that's another part of the church that people might not know about. It's like you have more jobs and titles in the church. You have deacon, minister of the minister of the cakes and the food and all that stuff, because it gives you a sense of responsibility. It gives you a sense of order. They fall out. Like, I can't go to my mom's church. She'd be like, sit down, you are embarrassing me. I was born and raised in the Catholic Church. I do not act the same way as I do in the Catholic Church as I do in the Baptist Church. I go there, I sit down, I know when to stand up, I know when to kneel and all that stuff. They're two churches, but they're the same faith. That's supposed to be the combining thing. But we're still segregated. But again, you got to think of, the people who created slavery were criminals. Period. They weren't the fine people of society. Then it grew and stuff like that. But they were like, hey, I bet you we can go in there and go and conquer that land and take. That was the people who took over America, for the best of my knowledge. Okay, now it is what it is. I'm not trying to say it, but that's what they taught me in school, and that was a public school. Anyway, that was way back. They might have changed that curriculum too, because now I think they teach you, be a priest and get another guy, and you can marry a guy. Weird. I think the criminals back then were probably a lot better than the ones we have now.